centuries before, sailors feared sailing off the edge of the earth.
All hands on deck!
But we were headed for the edge of sanity.
I believe you have seen things no one else has seen.
First off, can you tell me a little bit about bringing a true story to screen, specifically in terms of figuring out what text to put at the beginning of your movie? Because I just saw the 33, which takes a completely different approach for, I think, somewhat obvious reasons. But how do you decide how to do that?
Well, it really is a process of both following your sort of your gut, your instinct, what first dazzled you about the story. You know, and make sure that you never forget that. In this case, the truth of the story surprised me so much. I had no idea that Moby Dick was inspired by real events. You always want to preserve the thing you really love about the truth of the story. Then you want to dig deeper and start trying to find ways to push what you learn into the story while keeping, a movie narrative happening. So sometimes you have to combine things. Sometimes you have to invent certain things that to reflect a truth about the story, something that you think you've learned that you want people to understand, but maybe it never quite happened that way. Maybe you're combining 3 or 4 events. Maybe you're making something bigger on screen than it actually was, but you feel like it reflects the intensity that the person was actually experiencing in the true events. So you start to make these judgments, and of course it's a creative interpretation of real events when you make a movie like this, and it keeps going because you keep refining. You start to screen it. You see what people are responding to, what they continue to be curious about. And often that text that you're asking about is the last thing that gets defined, because what you're trying to do is, now that you understand the movie that you shot, now that you've screened it for audiences, you're trying to set the table in just the right way. And that Melville voiceover at the beginning is the letter that he's reading. It was one of the last things that we recorded, although we had done it a half a dozen times.
Can you tell me a little bit about the process of bringing this from script to set to screen? Because I told you I was lucky enough to be on the set 2 years ago, and it's very interesting to see what made it to screen, what didn't, and what's more pronounced than I thought it would be. Well,
it's a very ambitious story, and there's always a frustration level because you're learning so much. It's so exciting. You've got a fantastic set of actors. You always wind up going in with a script that's too long, and then you add on top of it because of all the excitement of discovery. As you're going along, so it really becomes a process of being very greedy when you're shooting, about trying to maximize every possible perspective and approach, and then being very judicious and thoughtful, thinking about the audience, thinking about what it is you're really trying to say, what are the most important ideas to try to convey, what are the coolest elements. So it kind of becomes a greatest hits version that you edit and edit and edit and try to offer the audience. But the great thing about this story, in my mind, was that there is complexity. The overarching story is straightforward. It's simple, it's classic, it's an adventure, it's a survival story, it has the whale, it's cool to look at, all of those things. But underneath that, there is a lot of emotional complexity and kind of thematic complexity. And look, I think audiences want an ambitious movie. Look at what they follow with TV shows. Look at the comic book series. Those characters are going through a hell of a lot in those stories, whether it's fantasy or reality. And so I thought the density of this story was a real plus.
If we don't shorten sail and pair off, it'll catch us on the beam.
Mr. Chase, we will stand on. Mr. Lawrence, hold our course.
Holding course, sir.
We'll lose half a day running like that. We'll scut the edge of it. The men can't handle a gust like this, then God help us all.
Was there anything that you had to cut that you're a little upset to see go? Actually, the one scene that I specifically am thinking of right now is we got to go inside, I think it was a water tank, and it was a scene where the Spanish sailors got attacked, and someone had a blue arm sleeve, so I'm like, oh, I'm going to get my gore. Someone's getting an arm ripped off or something, and then I did not see that in the final cut.
We used to start with the movie with an attack on a Spanish whaling crew, and we just decided it was better to start with our storyteller. In this case, it's Melville and the last survivor, Nickerson. We thought that was a more mysterious way to go. We still used flashes of that attack in the scene later where the Spanish captain is actually telling us what happened.
What did you learn most from test screening the movie?
I learned that audiences were interested in the history. It was exciting to watch the whale hunt, not like in a cool action way, but because they were learning something. And so, as intense as it was, the thing that I learned was that people who love whales can, modern thinkers, modern citizens are, and the vast majority of us are anti-whaling, but that people could separate that from the experience of seeing what it must have been like. And so, yeah, it's intense, it's action packed, and it feels real, but it wasn't off-putting.
I kind of liked how, especially Chris Hemsworth's character, approached it as a job, and there was something exciting about it. You wanted to root for him to get the whale so he can get home as fast as possible, but at the same time, it was just a job to him. It was something he had to get done, lead his men, and get home and be done with it. It wasn't something that he enjoyed doing.
I think it was that was really at the center of the whaling industry at that time. I'm sure there were some that loved the hunt, but I think many had some reservations about the brutality of it. And after the crew there'd been this counterattack by the whale, and their ship had been sunk in such a shocking, devastating way, in their journals, they began to question their place in all of this. Was this punishment for this way of life that they followed?
What approach did you take to the part where they're actually stranded and out in the sea and starving? Because I had the opportunity to read the book too before I visited the set, and that book goes into some pretty distressing details.
Well, I always believed that the one thing is that I always knew I wanted the film to be rated no more than PG-13, but be a strong PG-13. So it's not for little kids. But I did feel like this was a story that young people were gonna like and could get something out of. So it was important to me to reflect the drama of everything that happened, but not make it a horror show. Not it wasn't. So I was less concerned about being graphic than I was about getting the ideas across and being just visual enough and visceral enough so that it felt real.
I think you exactly hit that note that you just described.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit now about shooting on those whaling boats? What actually is the process, just in terms of, getting your cast and crew out there, setting up the shot, and then actually doing a take?
Well, you churn out to sea. Depending on the kind of water you're looking for, it's you go to various spots on the island and you evaluate the wind and all of that. You've got a couple of camera boats where the crew can keep their equipment and so forth. Then you've got smaller dinghies, because I didn't care a lot about having cameras on big cranes. I wanted it to be much more intimate, and so then it sort of keeps getting smaller and smaller. Now you've got the whale boat. You transport the actors out. They get on the whale boat. We found that anchoring whale boats was a terrible idea, and instead it was better for us to drift with the currents and work with the light. Sometimes we had divers in the water as safety divers in case the actors were doing something, some stunts in the whale boats. And so, it was always safety first, But there was, by the same token, a lot of discomfort and unpredictability because you are out there, and there were times when the weather would change abruptly, and we'd have to book it out of there.
Another thing that actually was brought up on set that really surprised me is a couple people referred to this as a low-budget film. And between just the scale of the sets, what it looks like in the final product, the VFX, just all the detail, I don't see it as that at all. Can you tell me a little bit about how it breaks down?
There was a low-budget mentality to the movie because while we had the resources to tell the story well, the actors, me, the director, the producers, we all took a fraction of our normal studio salary. So for us, it was a labor of love movie. It was a great opportunity to experience this, and we were working on this the way you'd work on a movie for Sundance, as an indie. Now the studio was there to support the below the line, but which means all the mechanics of making the movie and making sure the visual effects are great. And we knew we were very lucky to have that kind of support for this sort of drama, because it's not a full-on, playful, kind of escapist kind of movie. It's powerful, it's entertaining, but it's a drama. So we all had to watch every dollar of what we had to spend to try to tell this epic story and keep it within the boundaries of what the studio would give us, which, as I said, was plenty to make the movie, but we didn't have any extra.
And lastly, again, lots of cool details on the set. Did you take anything home with you?
I took one of the compasses, one of these brass compasses, and I also took this little box that had a kind of a carving of a whale on it.
Very good choice. Very practical
small,
choices.
But
I feel like you could have gone too crazy with that, but no, those are smart.
So I live and breathe. He's mine.
So it's true?
Yes, too much is true.